Moments ago, Britain was thrown into one of the darkest spirals of public disorder in modern memory. 12,347 police officers, an entire backbone of national security, walked out in a coordinated wave of defiance as migrant-linked street violence surged across multiple cities. What began as a single night of unrest has now torn open a crisis that ministers can no longer downplay, silence, or spin. For the first time in decades, the government is facing something far worse than public anger. It is facing abandonment from within its own ranks. Officers who once stood the line now say they have been pushed past breaking point, betrayed by the very officials sworn to protect them. And as their uniforms hit the ground, the country feels the shudder of a system cracking under its own denial. Within hours of the walkout, social media erupted like a national alarm bell. Videos flooded every platform. Burning cars, terrified families, streets ruled not by order, but by raw, unrestrained chaos. Commentators demanded answers, activists demanded resignations, and the Home Office released a statement so thin and cold, it only deepened the outrage. The atmosphere felt radioactive, as if the truth itself had become too dangerous for ministers to touch. Meanwhile, deep inside Westminster, panic swept through corridors once built on certainty and authority. Cabinet aides whispered of a government losing moral control. Senior MPs were seen pacing, arguing behind closed doors, desperate to understand how the crisis had escalated so violently, so quickly. For many officers, this wasn't simply a protest, it was the final act in a long and bitter struggle. Years of ignored warnings, months of spiralling street violence, weeks of cuts framed as restructuring. They say it was all leading to this moment, a moment when the weight of political arrogance finally crushed the front line. One officer, speaking anonymously, described the tipping point as a betrayal so deep it silenced the force. Another said the government had lost its grip on reality and expected officers to stand in the fire with no shield, no backup, and no truth. The bitterness in their voices is unmistakable and it is spreading. Across the country, the public can feel the divide widening. Communities already strained by violence are now left exposed. Parents are frightened to send children to school. Shop owners sleep behind barricaded doors. What should have been a manageable security crisis has mutated into a national reckoning. The silence from Downing Street speaks louder than any press briefing could. Every hour without resolution feels like another step toward a constitutional rupture. A moment when trust between the people and their protectors collapses entirely. The King, kept informed throughout the night, is said to be deeply concerned. Palace insiders hint at grave frustration, even quiet fury, directed at ministers who allowed tensions to escalate unchecked. While the monarch cannot intervene directly, the symbolism of his disappointment is already echoing through political circles. It exposes a dangerous contrast, a king urging unity and responsibility, and a government scrambling to defend its own failures. In a nation built on tradition, that contrast lands like a thunderclap. And yet the deeper question remains unspoken. What forces pushed thousands of trained officers sworn to protect the nation to abandon duty at the exact moment the country needed them most? Was this purely a reaction to surging violence or the symptom of something darker brewing beneath the surface? Some analysts claim this crisis did not erupt overnight. They argue it is the outcome of years of political neglect, cultural friction and institutional strain ignored for too long. Others whisper that factions within government knew this would happen and did nothing. As dawn breaks over a shaken Britain, everyone is left wondering the same thing. If the protectors have walked away, who stands between order and chaos now? And more importantly, what triggered this mass exodus at the very moment violence spiraled out of control? What truth is still being hidden? Who gave the order that sparked the walkout? And how far will this crisis spread before someone steps in to stop it? As the sun lifted over a fractured Britain, the government attempted to project control, but the illusion collapsed instantly. Overnight, cities once bustling with morning commuters awoke to streets patrolled not by officers, but by uncertainty itself. The walkout had created a vacuum, a silent, gaping void. And into that void poured rumour, fear and raw speculation. Ministers insisted the situation was manageable, and yet every hour revealed the opposite. Reports came in of neighbourhoods forming their own watch groups, of ambulances refusing to enter certain districts without escort, of businesses shuttering before noon because the threat of unrest had become too unpredictable. Britain didn't feel like a country in crisis, it felt like a country holding its breath. Inside the Home Office, the atmosphere had turned poisonous. Senior advisers blamed one another for misjudging the severity of the officers' grievances, while junior staff whispered of memos that had been buried, warnings that migrant-linked violence was accelerating far faster than public reports suggested. It was said that one leaked briefing, written weeks earlier, predicted a major confidence collapse within policing ranks if immediate action wasn't taken. That document, according to insiders, never reached the Prime Minister's desk. Whether it was buried deliberately or ignored out of convenience, now sits at the heart of a political storm no one can contain. The public might not know every detail yet, but they can feel the rot. They can sense the dishonesty beneath the reassurances. As pressure mounted, the Prime Minister made the fateful decision to hold an emergency press conference. A move advisers warned could backfire if the wrong question was asked, or if the wrong truth slipped through the polished veneer. When he finally stepped up to the podium, the room felt like a trap waiting to snap shut. His voice carried the weight of a leader, cornered by his own assurances. He spoke of temporary disruption, of operational adjustments, of isolated incidents. But the country no longer believed this careful choreography. The public had seen the images. They had heard the voices of officers breaking down on live radio, describing conditions that would cripple any force. The cracks in his speech were visible, and once the first journalist pressed him on the scale of the walkout, the facade shattered. His hesitation lasted less than a second, but in politics, a second can feel like a confession. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Hashtags surged. Commentators tore apart his statements in real time. Opposition leaders accused him of governing on fantasy. Even members of his own party released cryptic remarks hinting at internal betrayal. Some called it incompetence, others called it willful blindness. Either way, the effect was devastating. The crisis was no longer about policing. It had escalated into a question of national leadership, a question no one in power could answer without exposing deeper failures. In that moment, Britain saw something rarely visible in modern politics, a government visibly afraid of its own citizens. But the most shocking revelation arrived not through Parliament nor through official channels, but through a leaked recording posted anonymously at dawn. In it, a senior police commander could be heard describing a meeting with ministers days before the walkout. His voice was steady, calm, but tinged with disbelief. He claimed the government had dismissed escalating violence as manageable background pressure and warned him not to inflate public concern. He described being told to reduce patrols in certain hotspots to avoid provocation, an instruction he called reckless bordering on criminal negligence. The recording spread faster than any statement could counter. It ignited a fury that ministers had no language to extinguish. The claim that officers were ordered to stand down in the face of rising danger was not just a breach of trust. It was a sentence handed to communities now paying the price. As the recording circulated, officers who had remained silent began speaking anonymously. Their testimonies converged into a devastating pattern. They had been understaffed, underprotected, and politically restrained until the line finally snapped. Many said they felt abandoned long before they walked out. "You can't ask us to run into fire," one voice said, "when the people giving the orders won't even acknowledge the flames." Another described being briefed to prioritise optics over enforcement, a phrase that now echoes through every debate with chilling clarity. These were not the words of rebels, they were the words of a force pushed to breaking by decisions made far above their rank, decisions that carried consequences no minister would ever personally face. Meanwhile, the violence itself intensified. Not because officers had walked out, but because criminals sensed an opportunity.